Today is September 17th, 2019. I am Cameron Wood here at the Ohio History Connection in Columbus, Ohio, speaking with Luster Singleton. We're going to talk about mosaic and activism today.
Yay.
Luster, since we're going to talk about identity today, could you share with us some of your own personal identities that are important to you?
Okay. So, because I'm a part of this project, and thank you so much, I, as a faith believer, have to give some honor to God because I asked a very, very, very long time ago to just be a part of history, and I feel like the honor of being asked to do this project, I have to do that, and I have to give thanks and honor to my great-grandmother, Florence E. Ferris Adams, because this really is her story. And she was the storyteller and the history keeper in my mother's side of the family and the community. And I just know she's tickled, wherever it is, sitting on a cloud or whatever it is, in a whiff of the wind, I know that she is beyond ecstatic that her family's story has made it to, she was amazed by this place, Ohio Historical Society. So, yeah. And, I am a parent. I'm a freedom fighter. Social justice is my passion. It's in my blood. I am a reluctant mentor, I should say, and passionate that people's voices need to be heard because I spent so much time silent. And I just, I love everybody, and I'm a connector. I was once told, people, you always dabble in different spiritualities and faith. I think the whole pretense of all of it is love. And so in exploring that, once someone did my totem. Yes, it was a First Nations and Indigenous person, and at the same time, I don't know how that really supposed to happen, but anyhow, they told me that one of my totem spirits was a spider, and that spider built a whole big web to connect just all these different points that you never would imagine. It is annoying when I walk out on my back porch and my porch is connected to my garage and car. I don't really care for that, but it is amazing. And I took that to heart. So I think of myself as just this bridge, this, what Gloria Anzaldúa says, this bridge called my back. I just think of myself as a connector.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your grandmother and why your story is kind of her story as well?
She grew up in Danville, Kentucky. Only had was maybe sixth grade when her father made her stop going to school because girls didn't need to go to school. And the tenacity of her and her teacher, her father, well, let's just say he was a rambling guy and liked to fish a lot and was a man of the bottle. And he would go fish for his family. And once he left the house, she would sneak over to the school and be outside the window and get her assignments and things like that. And so she got to, I believe, the 9th grade and then saw what I believe is an opportunity to get herself away from that situation. She loved to learn. my grandmother used the word queer all the time, and she would say, "Oh, that's very queer," and that meant that she was excited about it, that it deserved more discovery and curious. And so it happened that this preacher, young preacher, caught her eye, she caught his eye, something like that. And she had sisters in Cincinnati. And so she gets to Cincinnati, and somewhere in all of that, they get together. And she then leaves with him to start a church in Zanesville, Ohio. And so there's Union Baptist Church there. And he was a co-founding junior pastor at that church. My great aunt still attends. We still attend and go to things there. And the whole time, though, she was always outspoken. And very early on, my great-grandfather had lots of attention of the ladies in the church, and my grandmother couldn't stand for that. And they separated ways. They never got divorced because she was a very deeply religious woman. And so they never got divorced. And I never met him. I only met him when I saw him in his casket. I never met him before that, but heard stories about him, and not bad stories. And then she was divorced or alone with 2 young daughters. And she decided her daughters were junior high, I think. And when they went to high school, she decided that she'd go back to school at night and graduated because she wanted to make sure her daughters knew to do more. She always wanted a degree, so she graduated right before her oldest daughter graduated. She did ironing. She worked at a theater. She did all of these things and was able to buy her own house in a time it had to be incredibly difficult. But she was a strong, what they said, handsome woman. My great-grandmother could palm your head. I mean, her hands were massive. She was so familiar to me. She was always referred to as a strong woman. You know, she never remarried or never had another relationship that we knew about. Although I knew that she had a very, very close friend named Tilly that I like to think now, when I think back on, I would always sit near her somewhere, just watching her and studying her and being a part of adult conversations, and she would know I was there. But as long as I stayed quiet, and I would just sit there while they would talk and just learn things and watch her. But she wasn't like the other women. My grandmother did not step down to anybody, and she commanded with a force, but I never really heard her raise her voice. But it could get sharp, and you knew, but I never really heard her. My mother and grandmother might tell different stories, but the great-grandchild never saw that. And she always told me that to never mind it. To never mind. She knew that my heart was sad a lot. I was very precocious. I read all the time, but that really was to just stand back and hide because I didn't want to do a lot of the things that, I'll build a house or make a car or something for your Barbie, but I'm not trying like to play with Barbie. Not like that. Anyway, I'll do all these other things, but please don't make me. Please, why are you giving me this ballerina doll? Like, why are you giving me that? And my great grandmother could see that. And she could see that I was curious about things. She was an organizer for SNCC. She was an organizer for the Southern Women's Christian League. I think that's the acronym. I think that's the way that goes. She was passionate about speaking up about what the Negro needed to do and what her people needed to do and how the church should lead and take care and to not step down. She never drove. We would walk back and forth to downtown almost every day. We spent a lot of time with her in the summer, and any break, we were always down at my great-grandmother's house. And we have lived with them off and on. My parents got eloped and had me a month later. So, it was that kind of situation. But my great-grandmother, I don't know. We would walk behind her like little ducks. And in Zanesville on Pine Street, still to this day, across from Putnam Park, is a house that has swastikas and Aryan flags as the curtains in it. And we lived up the hill, or my great-grandmother lived up the hill from there, and she would walk us right down to the corner before it, walk across the street, and she would be like, chin up, and you better not look over, you better not. She always spoke proper English. That was the other thing. You would get in trouble to how I sort of use colloquialisms and I use slang. That was not something that my big mama would stand for or put up. She always required you to her learn it meant you use the language of the master better than him, better than them. That your studies were the thing that would get you everything. And when I look at what she was able to do, it wasn't a little tiny house. It was a Victorian house. It had 3 huge rooms and a huge bathroom that you really could have put a person in. It had a small yard in the back and a freestanding garage. When I think about it, very upper middle class, especially in the black community of Zanesville, and maybe we were more than that. I don't know, because she required humbleness as well, and service. If you were there at church, either polishing pews and helping clean up, or you were there for choir practice, or she had a meeting, my grandmother had a meeting, like you had this because you took care of that. And so she was the person, even when I couldn't quite find friends, I was just odd. I'm still odd. But I was just odd, and she just was the person who would be like stand up tall. We'd walk by that house, don't slide your eyes, and walk with pride. You didn't look raggedy, you were together. That pride is what would carry you through, and to not believe what anybody else said about who you were or how you were. And so I think that she gave me that to be able to do. here I am. I'm sure I was more than just a tomboy. And I think people could see that. I was more than just a tomboy. I didn't have the words, I want to be a boy. That just wasn't any kind of concept because I don't necessarily think. I identify as a transmasculine person. I identify as a gender nonconforming person now in the last couple years. So Mosaic has helped even me with that. I identify as a transgender person since the mid 90s, but that was more as a political reason that I did that, and I understood myself to be very in the middle. But these other terms of transmasculinity or gender nonconforming, like now I'm gender nonconforming, transmasculine of center. I don't have a desire to be a man, necessarily a biological man. I know myself to not be that, but I'm a dude and I'm masculine, and this is how my masculinity is. And because of the worst thing that I knew growing up in terms of masculinity was to be an effeminate man or a pretty boy, and I'm definitely that. Like, I am a pretty boy. So all of that, as you can imagine, would make things, as people's heads are spinning as you hear this, that's what I would have to try and navigate in little southeastern Ohio, you know, on the river in the country. And my grandmother helped me do that. She could swing an axe. She was insanely strong. Insanely strong. She had very, her native features, but nothing that we could ever prove. But her stories of who her grandmother was were very square, and she was just like a massive woman. I think only, I don't know if she was as tall as I thought that she was. I'll have to look that up. But I know that she was taller than any of the women that were around me. And so some of them are 5'10", so maybe she was around that. If not, she just commanded that space, you know.
Amazing woman.
A very amazing woman. I would say, Julie Dash in this film called Daughters of the Dust. I think she did something here. Has some lines in there where, and the women are referred to as omen, and that was my grandmother, like an omen, you know, like just this light in her eye and this energy that drew people and convinced people that they could do anything, you know. And the way that my grandmother, her daughters were involved in kind of legislative stuff as community representatives. You know, now I go back and look through, my grandmother just passed a few years ago, and I'm finally able to kind of look at some of the stuff, not been able to look at some of the stuff, and seeing where, you know, she's up in Columbus at the State House for this reason, that. They were very involved in the NAACP, a chapter in Zanesville. They were some movers and shakers, you know, and so I think all that comes from Florence, you know, I really do.
You learned a lot of things from your great-grandmother. What do you think is, if you had to distill it down to something, what do you think it was?
How to make a drop of water quench the thirst of 20 people. how to be into yourself. Maybe sometimes that fake it till you make it type of thing, just to when you hear no, find out for yourself if that's really the answer. You know, it's sort of like, no, okay, why? And then figure out, maybe you just have to take the carrot and dice it rather than slice it to get to what you need. It's that type of thing. You know, she really did grow up with nothing. And she really was sort of the middle child who really led the rest of her family and whatnot. Right now what I hear is that song, Hold Your Head High. Well, that song, that's what I hear, is just that, is to, even when you get down, that it is always her spirit, and that gets me back up. I know this. I hear her. I have memories of us doing the dishes a lot together, and in my memories and dreams of her, I don't see her mouth moving, but I hear us talking, and it's that she knew and would tell me that I was different, and that not to worry about their fear. I hear her words saying that, though I tell you that I don't have a memory of seeing her lips actually say it. But it's something that I carry with me. I hear her all the time to say, don't, never mind the devil. My grandmother didn't talk about the devil in a way of a fire and brimstone. The devil as negativity. The devil as self-doubt. The devil as the devil loves to cloud it up and get everybody thinking they say the Lord works in mysterious ways. Well, his greatest angel must also. And wouldn't that be the trick? To get you to think that none of that is worth it. Isn't that the trick? Because then you're alone and whatnot. So it's her refusal to believe the hype, refusal to she's like my, what did I say? I can't remember the words I use now. She's like my fight back warrior. There's things that I know that had to be horrible that happened to her that I don't know. You can see the wounds if you look honestly enough in someone's eyes. But it was enough. She lost 2 sons, one to, I believe it was pneumonia, maybe a year or 2 after he was born. And the second was stillborn, because in hurrying to get ready, I believe, for Thanksgiving, she hit her stomach on the end of a end table, and later ended up having him, and it was his head. It had killed him in vitro. And so that had to be terrible. And then your husband leaves, or is scandalous, and he's an exalted minister. He went on to, when we went to his funeral, it was amazing the number of people who rolled out for this gentleman. So, and the only time I ever saw my grandmother cry was the night that my great-grandmother cried, was the night that my grandmother, I was lurking around as usual, and my grandmother called my great-grandmother to tell her that he had passed. And a few tears just dropped. And then she hung up the phone. That was still rotary phone. And she hung up the phone and took a deep breath and went to getting everything figured out, and how our church was going to honor and respond to him. And she was listed as his wife, and and that was just amazing to me. And she would never make me, I don't know, she just, and when she turned and she looked at me, and I was like, and she just told me to put some water on, and that was start writing a list and figuring out what we were going to do. So, in a nutshell, to just stand and be in your truth and yourself, and honor your community, love God, love God, and know that you are God. And for me, it's like that. So nothing else, I went through all these phases. I've identified as a lesbian in my lifetime. It was shelter and safety. But that little trip through the tulips there did not deter me away from my faith. And that I just always thought, I never once thought that God hated or abhorred me or anything like that. Like, to me, that's ludicrous. But I did think that his people were insane, and I didn't think that maybe it would be easier if I didn't have to deal with his people. Sometimes I think that there needs to be more conversation about the self-harm that people do and what it's caused by. Mine was never caused by feeling like God had forsaken me, or that I was an embarrassment to Jesus Christ or anything like that. Never. If for no other reason, because my big mama told me so, and she was right. She was right. Every time I stray away from the things that she taught, I get caught up and messed up. And so that is not right. It's daggone people. It's her daggone people. It's their daggone people that caused the problem and the strife. Even when the religious figures, last year, so I toy with going to theology school. And toy with means, since a young child, I used to do church in the basement after church, because I would have to be down there with my siblings and other people's children. Like we did the thing. My sister and I played piano, so you went home, you had Sunday dinner, you played the piano, my brother did a few things on the drum, then you went in the basement with other people's kids, and very middle class, right? You hung out down there. I hated it, and because I didn't want to be down there with those children, or be the person in charge. But if I had to, then I decided I was going to hold church, and until I got in trouble for that, and I stopped doing it. My mom caught me having church. I was trying to heal someone when she came down there, and it just, they're products of the 50s. She completely lost her mind. And I think also she had this child that she probably was terrified for. I could be outside playing football with the best of them. They would always play Smear the Queer, and guess who got to be the queer? but I would run over those guys. Like, I had no fear at all. I was always the captain of Starship. I was, like all of those things. So I'm sure, and it wasn't changing. So I'm sure that it terrified her. And then I'm down there, like, women weren't preachers like that. I was like preaching like the pastor preached. And so after that, I sort of kept that to myself, until I lived in my own places, and I would do my own church on Sunday because I couldn't find a church to feel comfortable in. But I've always flirted with that. And so it led me to hanging out off and on up at the Ohio, the Methodist Theology School of Ohio, FESCO, right up there almost off of 23, almost to Delaware. And there's a little joke. I go to so much stuff up there to not be a student. I'll just go hear speakers or sermons or whatever's going on. And they asked me to come for Trans Remembrance or Trans Visibility Day. I don't know which one. But they asked me to come up there. I thought I was going to be a part of a panel. And as you know, I'm a little scattered and difficult to I need a PA. But I didn't really look at what was being required of me until maybe 8 days prior. And when I read it, oh no, I was actually giving the talk for Wednesday sermon, noon sermon that everybody comes to during the week. I was like, what? And so, God's got all kinds of jokes. God thinks God's so funny. I would cuss, but I don't want that on there. But it starts with F and ends with N. Anyhow, so funny. And I had to do this talk, and what I ended up saying and what is true in my heart is the first transgender person that I ever met was Jesus Christ. I don't get it. Most religious spiritual leaders of any kind of religion are ambiguous in their gender, to say the least, by our own rigid standards. Jesus, okay, it was of the time, but other people depicted with long hair of that time is not flowing, silky, or manageable and beautiful. The hands, he was supposedly a carper. He was supposedly a carpenter. I don't know if anybody's looked at carpenter hands, but they're not soft and long and slender and all of that. He cried and he had compassion, things that we immediately want to beat out of our young boys. To do that, people start saying you need to straighten that up right there. I don't get it. He sat around, doing very effeminate things. The depiction of him, rosy cheeks, long lashes, I don't care what his skin color is, that oftentimes is the majority of the depiction. Not saying there aren't others, but the majority of the depiction is not of a very virile, muscular, Jesus Christ is sitting around stroking a lamb. We see a man doing that unless he's a farmer, and even then, someone's going to be accusing them of being sweet in the pants. So wouldn't it be the job of the devil to make us think that that's bad when Jesus says that we're part of Jesus? We are made in Jesus' image. Okay, well then, if we're all made in Jesus' image, Jesus must be transgender or something, because I'm pretty sure in the Webster dictionary under female, you would fit under female, and you would fit under male. So what are y'all saying? So it's that kind of, like, I've never thought that my gender and the way that I present, I just know my energy comes out this way. I just know that the things that are called masculine seem at home for me. But I am I am the one who likes to vacuum too. I like to vacuum, I like to cook. I would be Mr. Mom. That would, I guess, be the title that fits me or something. But, and my big mama always made sure, was always telling us she loved history. Oh, she loved history, all of it, the classics, anything. So she was always telling us these different stories. She would be connecting. She was such a storyteller. She would talk about our family and then work that in with some kind of historical lesson. And maybe that's why I have such a love too. But when I think back on it, it would be stories of something that was queer, and it would be unusual, people doing unusual things that weren't sort of like a Joan of Arc, that she might tell that, but she might tell the story of a person of color, like, I don't know why, I don't know why nothing's coming to my mind right now, but anyhow, she would tell us all these stories about people who stepped outside of what they were supposed to do and were succeeded and did for their community. That act helped their community. And so I guess I'm just saying that, the doubt around who I am came from outside forces, not for me necessarily inside the church, and maybe inside the church, but nothing to do with the spirituality. I just really, I'm often like, really, that's how you feel? Why would you want to have all that hate? I don't know, but hey, Moses came down from the mountain and people were dancing around a cow, and melting it and stealing and raping and pillaging and killing each other. So who knows? Who really knows? I just know I'm trying to get here, and I'm trying to open up the door and let anybody else get through and not have to go through as much. I'm mesmerized. So Mosaic, our job at Mosaic is to do, we're a government funded program. And our targeted demographic are 13 to 29-year-old folks of color, folks with the X, of color. The grant says people, who I also identify as transgender, gender-nonconforming, and non-binary. Linkage to care, we do HIV and STI testing, and self-empowerment, healthy living, healthy thinking. Let's just try and think about other ways to think about your health. So for us, that means self-empowerment. So it's a drop-in center. And I am amazed that these 14 and 15-year-olds are coming in here freely saying out loud, yeah, I'm gender nonconforming, or I'm a trans guy or trans girl, or I'm looking at that and other. I am so amazed what we have been able to do. Even with everything that's going on with the current administration, why don't we just say Voldemort? Because, people have stopped saying the name, it's like the current administration. So, just put a big old V and a snake face, and we can connect that. These kids are talking about it. It's kind of in those same terms, but even despite all of that, they're here and we have a place where they can take a breath and just be. And how fantastic is that? You know, all I've wanted to do, and I feel that Big Mama wanted to do, was to shine that light so that somebody could get through the crack, you know? And now, Mosaic, it's sort of like full circle that I'm here and able to provide a space. Our greatest joy when folks come into Mosaic is when they look around and they say, I'm not sure what I expected, but it's comfortable here. It's, wow, that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, we know we need to get people tested. We know that. I mean, our country has been terrible stewards of our health. We've had a way to stop the transmission of HIV for 20 plus years, and we are just now putting a minimal amount of effort to it, while our current administration has not fit, as far as I know, put any people in the roles of the office while things are backed up and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we have this space now where kids are coming and able to talk about what's going on with their life, how they want to be seen, how they want to empower each other. And really, their gender is the least of it. And so we really can get to some more, what do we need to do to have you survive, conversations there, because we have this place. And they themselves figuring out they're going to go to their schools and go to their rec centers and get them to get over themselves so that they can be the places for a betterment of the community that schools are supposed to be. I don't know. Did I go too far off? I don't know. Did I stay connected?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Mostly.
There's also the bad side of being a spider. There's also the challenging side. I won't say bad, the challenging side. So, you know, it is sometimes, you know, when, you know, someone who's 15 says, well, can you talk to me about packing? You know, I kind of feel like I want to have a penis. I don't have a penis. Can you talk to me about that? Do I have to do that? It is like I never thought in a million years that I would be having this conversation. But to be having this conversation seems empowering, because what I know is now we can talk about why do you want to do that? You don't have to do that. They're all different kinds of, there are biological men born with little or no penis. Like that doesn't make you anything. It's fine if you need that or want that, but let's have that conversation. And then here's how to have a conversation with other people. You know, we just had a back to school thing. We didn't know how it was going to go. It was packed. And what we got to do is have these conversations with parents and the kids. And the parents, more than the kids, were trying to be like, well, I'll leave you to have this conversation. No, we need you. We need you here. I want you to be sure of what I'm saying. You should be. And this conversation, if we're going to save this generation, this conversation has to be for all of us to have. And some of it is just like, what do I do with my feelings when I kind of feel this way? Do I need to run all the way into the abyss and I don't even know if I'm male, female, if I want to be like this or that, how I want to interact with you, and all of that, you could take your time and figure that out. You don't have to get to love. My friend Michaela says that people, the way that pop culture, cosmetic, and the music industries, entertainment industries, use sex like it's a sport, you know? And it's to like try and get people like, and that's the goal. That's always the goal. The end of like your relationship is that goal. And so it's, you know, taking this opportunity, and we have to talk about all of it because you're working out your gender as you're trying to work out your attraction to people. And they're really separate things, but we don't have that conversation about it. They are separate. And they don't, just because you identify as male does not mean that you are going to present in this way. And the way you present does not mean you're going to be like this. You may still be a girly male and still be you may be very girly male and still be attracted to quote unquote female feminine people. It doesn't mean that because you put this on that then you have to go be gay because you're an effeminate guy. And so all of these conversations are together. These kids get it, and that is what we get to do around this topic of transgenderness, and it's really just fluidity that we're trying to get to. There isn't any person that I know that doesn't exhibit a little of the other. I mean, really feminine, hyper femininity and hyper masculinity are at the edges. People try to make it seem like I'm at the edge. No, I'm not at the edge. I am smack dab in the middle. Excuse me, y'all are out there. You're way out there. The farther you get out there, the farther away you are from the masses. So why do we, and so, you know, that's where we get to what? Power, because somebody a long time ago figured that out. I don't know. You know, but what's awesome about Mosaic, more than, you know, I'm just going to be honest, more than the reason that I decided to go and work there is for the relationship building, for the community building. It's way more important than if somebody tests. If somebody tests, that's where the money's coming from. But at the end of the day, test mess. We have got to get to people so they don't want to die before they test. So they're not killing each other with their toxic relationships, both toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. You know, but some of the greatest harm that's been done to me is by these communities, LGBTQ, QIA+, Black community, communities of color have wounded me in ways that I dare say will never really heal. You know, a finger's going to stay crooked, the scar's not going to go away. From those, what we do to ourselves. Maybe it's because I have an expectation for people who identify as white to offend me in some way. I have that expectation, and I can, for the most part, I can empower myself to talk about it with love and gentleness in my heart until I realize that's not what they're doing, and then that's a whole nother beast. But I have come to a place where I can do that. I know that everybody's trying. I don't think that anyone socialized in mainland USA gets away from racism, ethnocentrism, classism. I don't think that you get away with that. With not having that, no matter how liberal or whatever. Liberals, there's this liberal conservatism that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and whereas, liberal people have helped me. Liberal white people, thank you, liberal white people. Honestly, because it is the help from those folks that bring me to here. And that would be something that Florence Adams would say. You cannot look, what is it? What's that saying? Don't look a gifted horse in the mouth. I think that's what it is. Is that it's ridiculous to you don't know how the universe, how the divine is going to give you what you need after you ask for it. So then it comes and you want to be in your feelings about how it comes. The thing is to take the opportunity and to stay in yourself. It's hard, stay in yourself, and to use that opportunity and to not forget. And as soon as you get that opportunity, extend it to somebody else. And so I have to thank white liberals for helping me. I would have never gotten into graduate school. Well, I don't know about never, but at that time it was a bleak thing. And it into the college program, into finding my way to women's studies, all of that came from the efforts and the sweat equity and the work equity of white liberals and the black liberals who knew them, And so I think that you can't put things out on the extreme because it just will not work together like that. How would it be for me now to say, well, now you got to get the hell out of my way, and yeah, thank you, but you're no longer a part of this conversation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can't. It's the relationship building. It's all these pieces that don't seem like they go together, but if we don't put those pieces together, we can't get people to do what the grant is saying that it's supposed to do. And now after we're starting on our third year, we have finally, one of the things we had to do is help people even, it's kind of like if you go to, if I went to my 9-year-old and I said, listen, are there things that you really want to do and you feel like maybe you're getting yelled at every day at school, maybe you're looking around and your playground isn't really together, all of these types of things. And he's like, yeah, okay. And I'll be like, all right, here's $30,000, son. You tell me what you want me to do with that. We have to have more conversation. And that conversation, and I say, and I want you to do it in 5 weeks. We have to have a whole bunch of conversations before we can get there. And that's kind of like what I think about Mosaic. And so what I was saying is the reason that I really made an intentional effort to be a part of this project is because I have some of that experience. And I knew that when you get into grants, because when you get into grants, sometimes the people forget about the relational piece and forget about, we're talking to a community of people of color are not having these conversations around transgender, gender-nonconforming, non-binary. Not in big, huge ways. It's not at our table. It's not in our pulpit. And if it's not at the table and it's not at the pulpit and nobody's really talking about it at the club, it is not in our community. So we have to have conversations about what that even is. The kind of conversation that says, well, okay, you identify as a sissy boy, right? Yeah, but I'm still a man. We agree on that. Under, like just simply stated, under man, though, is all the things that are listed under, is that you? No, I'm a sissy boy. All right, so that is gender nonconforming. Oh, I'm still a man. Yeah, you're still a man. Gender nonconforming man. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot, and I don't think that folks necessarily understand that that's what we have to do. You know, we also have to tell these communities of color that that this health company is safe. You know, communities of color have no trust in the medical profession, and especially researchers, and especially grantors who come in, spend 5 years. It takes that much time to get something going, really. Any business model will tell you that. If you can't sustain yourself well for 5 years, don't even bother. Don't even do that to yourself. So it takes 5 years, but in our communities, the grants are only 5 years. And so by the time it gets up and going and running, it leaves. Why? Because it didn't meet the objective, because it was too big of an objective for that time. It was a 5-year goal, not a 1 year, not a 1 year goal. So I wanted to come and try and help navigate, even if we were going to go into performance plans or things like that, to kind of navigate and be the another one of my totem spirits is the hawk. And what a hawk does is a hawk talks to everybody and tells everybody what's going on, what's coming down the road. So if you listen, if a stranger comes in, a hawk is like, oh, they're on the road, right there, you know, or if there's a fire, if there's hawks will, that's what they do. And so it's another thing I take to heart, is to try and bring that voice and try and carry those words so that we could say, no, we're on the right path, but we need these people's voice. We have to go out here, get these folks and drag them here and have them see that this is a safe space. And let's just have conversations and figure out how it's all going to work out. And so we've been able to do that and are finally getting these youth to me, 29 is not really youth, young person. Some of them are like 25, 26. Young folks to really explore and talk about their gender. And it's been amazing. I have learned so much, you know, in just how they're navigating things and how it's operating in schools and ways that we may be able to get the conversations around just gender freedom. I mean, can we just say that? Can we just like have gender freedom without everybody freaking out? Lordy, you know, like can we just do that? I don't know. It's been kind of exhausting and magical.
Sounds, it must keep you on your toes.
It does keep you on your toes. And it's, you know, it's difficult being a person working in a community that you are also and providing trauma-informed care, really, to a community when you're part of that community. It's a treacherous tightrope sometimes. We can't overlook the fact that there is a high percentage of physical harm, self-harm, and suicide in our community, and we see it sometimes right firsthand. And when you realize that people don't have anywhere but the corner of a abandoned garage to sleep for the night, I myself have had 5 transgender or gender-nonconforming Black folks under the age of 30 commit suicide in the last 15 months. It is taxing and overwhelming, and sometimes it is, it does seem like, I don't know, Big Mama, maybe we need to go sit down somewhere. All because someone doesn't want their son to have bows in their head, or they want their daughter to take beautiful prom pictures. And it's, difficult because you just trying to get folks to see the damage that they do. And all 5 of these people were really brilliant. Really, really brilliant minds and organizers. It is a little disconcerting because all these folks were organizers in their own right. And so when you see that these young folks, they're often, there are the people that stay hidden in their room, but there's an alarming percentage of these queer kids, queer young folks, queer people doing intimate harm to themselves that are leaders in the community. And so that is that's a hard part of the job. And so, trying to manage all of that sometimes it looks like this series that we're doing called Back in the Day, where we're inviting in community people that the community, if you said, who should I talk to that's trying to do something in this community, you'd hear these names over and over. Maybe not necessarily on the radar of the city or on the radar of the media or that type of thing, but we ask them to come in and we just kind of do something like this and talk to them, because part of what's going on is people think that they don't know their history. They don't know their history, and they don't know that people survive and they thrive, and that they do have stories like theirs, and there are suggestions for how to navigate that and how to get around that. And this is what living your truth. I'm terrified. Myself, I'm terrified every day. Every day I am scared to death. every day. Before I step out of my car, before I step out of my house, before I go into work, every day I am scared that somebody is going to get me because I'm black, somebody's going to get me because I'm a big old queer, somebody's going to get me. I have been beat up merely because someone thought we think that I was a black man with a white woman. You know, I'm scared every day. And these things do happen, and every day we do see where trans people, and particularly trans people of color, are being killed and murdered, and just, you know, things happening to them that'll affect them for the rest of their life. And we also need these other stories that say, yeah, that did happen to me. No, I don't visit it that often. But here's a story I would like you to hear about. And here are ways, you know, yeah, my one friend who getting ready to do it in a couple months, you know, spent time in prison, in men's prison. She's a trans woman, you know, and I'm not just talking about a couple weeks. They were down. And what they do now and how they do and what we think would benefit you to not head that way. And so Mosaic we're able to do that, and that's one of the ways that we counter, you know, just try to counter the bad stories, because, you know, popular culture, well, pain and gore and whatnot sell. Misery sells. People can say to you they know how to be miserable. And so that sells, you know, and I know that we can provide like things like Thanksgiving and things like movie nights and things like that. Families just come and hang out. There's some food in the cupboard. Get it and just come and hang out, and let's just try and not pretend, but you do have a choice in how you respond to things. And sometimes, a lot of times, you cry and yell and scream, and I don't know, I'm a fan of going to the railroad tracks, putting on some safety goggles, kids, zipping up my hoodie, or tying it really tight after having stopped at the thrift store and bought the cheapest box of plates that there is, and taking a marker and writing mean, nasty things on it about the people that I'm really upset about, and then smashing them on the ground. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's so cathartic. But the goggles a must, this a must, because pieces do fly up. But it's that kind of thing. And it's just being able to tell people to do that. It doesn't work all the time, and maybe there's a time it won't work. But we can't really think about that. What are we going to do about getting up right now? And I think that that's the thing that Mosaic, just just that we're out. I mean, just that is scary in a state like Ohio. I could just walk down the street drinking. I could leave the bar that I sat in and got drunk with my gun on my side and walk down the street and just shoot up, just stand there in the window and shoot everything up. And the fact that we're willing to be out there and do that gives people so much hope. I want one of those Batman lights to be on top of the building with an M, though, like with the Mosaic, so that we could shoot that up at night. My mind works like a comic book. I'm always seeing movies and stuff in my head, but I think that would be really a really awesome thing to do. Or just just a big TG and C and B, shoot it up there. And another thing we get to do is to talk to people who are not TG, do not identify as TG and C and B, and just be like, this place is for you too, you see. You have to come and get educated by it. It's just like all our cultural months. Yes, it is a celebration, African American History Month. Yeah, it's a celebration for me, and it's really a celebration. Like, that's American history for everybody. You shouldn't be thinking about it as just my day or my holiday or my whatnot. And that's the same as we try to, the other part about our grant, it says, for those people that I named and their partners, their friends, family, and community. So if you know me, then you are welcome at Mosaic, because at the very least you're my community. And come on over and see what it's like to, just have, where was I? I need to write them. I was in Skyline Chili, right here in the University District. They have 2 single-stall restrooms, and they got male and female on them. Why? Only one person. So you made the effort. So what that is like to try and appease, right? You made the effort. So really, if somebody like myself decides to go into the male restroom and someone doesn't think I should be there, or in the female restroom and someone thinks I shouldn't be there, it's not going to be a problem because it's only a single stall. So you're trying to appease people. Can you just put restroom on there though? Like, why you got to make it like now I got to stand there? And there are people that police the bathroom, there are. So it's like, really, why do we have to have this extra? What? Why? Why now? No, I don't have to. But as a freedom fighter, and I am working in the University District, it's poor stewardship of me if I don't bring to your attention, being in the University District, that if you have a single stall, can you just put restroom on the door? And like, we appreciate it. I'm not even sure if that's, but my guess is that's why. My guess is that that's why you did it that way. But can you just take one more step? Because the majority of people won't even, they'll be happy to not have to worry about it either. Because really, if that restroom's full and that one's not, a person shouldn't have to think about, can they go in there? Now my lover decided to, because they were waiting, and I was like, there's only one in there. And because someone said, oh, someone's in there. And so she's like, oh, I'm just going in there. And there was a little rustle of people like tittering because someone that looked like a girl went in the the male bathroom. But I don't know. I digress. It's all these little things, all these little, kind of like, if you saw The Land Before Time, any version of it, they always have this murky, like pond or something that bubbles are popping up from and exploding. That's what I think about it. That's how I think about the way that I have to navigate things, and it's just like another bubble that's just like, really, I thought this was solid ground right here. All right.
That's the burden of a freedom fighter, right?
It is. I'm reluctant. I call myself the reluctant evangelist. I am the reluctant mentor. I have a few mentees, and I tell them, like, I am like, when the last person who came was like, I need a mentor or something. I was like, oh my, why no? I was like, no, I'm not doing it. They were like, well, you wouldn't have to. I was like, I do not want to do that. And they still just keep coming around. I'm just like, and what else can I do? It is our job. It's my duty to listen and do the best that I can do to have someone else's experience be supported. And if not positive, just not alone, And I guess this is, and I'm fond of saying that, our generation, my generation, I'll be 58 next week. Oh my God. Wow. Yeah, I'll be 58 next week. And what I have realized is what the AIDS epidemic did to our generation. It devastated us in terms of really building our legacy to step in and step up. We see so many folks coming along now that are like, oh, we haven't done anything in Ohio. We haven't, Ohio is lax in its attention to, these LGBT issues or in the fight coming from the streets. And that's just absolutely not true. But we stopped telling our stories, I think because it hurt so bad, because when our mentors were dying right and left. Am I making sense? There's this gap, it seems. We were just trying to think, like, let's count, like, how many out and loud and vocal queer folks of color are there in Ohio, and we didn't get very far. And I remember when I was 20, 30s, there were all these people. There was Barbara. There's Chris Carter, Candy Carter, and Barbara Smith. There was, I'm so terrible with names. All I know is there is a list of people. And we kind of knew who our elders were and could go to them. And I don't think that my generation, we did as great of a job storytelling our history in a way that folks could find it easily. People are amazed to hear about the things that have gone down here in Ohio, which I'm like, we didn't just wake up and get like the stuff that we have in terms of, you can at least hope that the city will fight on your behalf if you get wrong. if homophobia raises its ugly head and you get wronged. It seems to be that type of a city. It seems to be, you can't experience Columbus about every 3 or 4 videos you're going to see for the, Visitors Bureau. You're going to see something and that's going to be like, was that a gay flag, or was that like a same-sex couple? Was that? So all of those things are there. So obviously something must have happened here. But in terms of just really what we did in the neighborhoods and on the streets, those stories are missing. The story of how Stonewall Columbus gets to be Stonewall Columbus. What blew up and happened with the Black Pride 4, 2 years ago, is not unlike other things that happened and blew up in the 90s and the 80s, and when there was a channel, what was that? 21. Channel 21 was public access TV, and it was like Community Hour, something like that, but it was really an undercover gay show. And this guy interviewed like all the gay people around the town. Where is that? We don't have those history. The Stonewall has been, and not to throw out dirty laundry, but I think that you have to tell all these stories so people know that they have an history. They don't feel so alone, and they have more respect for the people that are around. And it's just like so not helpful to be like something never happened. But there have been marches in front of Stonewall around issues of people of color. There have been marches in the Pride Parade around people of color and around trans people. There has been a small but Dyke March that was ahead of the Pride March. So what that tells me is we haven't done a good job of getting our stories and telling our story out there so people know this and can make these connections, so that the momentum that was gained with, people can have their feelings however they want about what went down with the Black Pride 4. But what it was a catalyst was that over 1,000 people came together in one place to make a movement to move our city towards a more equitable legislative representative or something like that, and it was lost. That momentum was lost because the folks who were leading it didn't know their history enough to not piss on the people who had been up there and were working and were like, oh my gosh, we would have been a part of this and we could have had this really do what it needed to do. And I think that if we did a better job of that type of thing and having that out there, then it wouldn't be fluttering like it's fluttering now. Not that people will say that out, but I want to say that out. That just all of us, and I would say that there's a certain amount of transphobia that operates in there, and a certain amount of racial separatism that works in there, and a certain amount of liberal conservatism operating, and all those things create where we're at with this impasse now. And once again, we're really having to try and go back and get the stories out here so people can take a breath and realize that we are indeed working together, and we have the capacity to figure out something that that, I don't know if the word is that, I was going to say elevate, but I don't know if that's really the word that I want to use. That gives us all the room that we need to feel heard and respected and honored. Yeah. Yeah.
When did you come to Columbus?
I came to Columbus in '79. I came up here to go to OSU, and it was a complicated thing. I was 5 months pregnant. I had just told my parents. And I opted to come and live in the towers and go to school. And I knew myself. At that time, I would have said, I knew I liked girls. And at about 8, I knew I liked girls, but it really was because I wanted girls to treat me how they treated boys. I didn't want them treating me like girls. So it was really that. So I felt like to like girls was a way to get to that. But I knew that, I had spent 6 summers as a Girl Scout camp leader or camp counselor, and so I had done lots of observation around the alleged lesbians that were there, and so it seemed comfortable. Nobody questioned how I was and all of that, and so I knew all of that. I got pregnant because I overheard someone talking about me and saying that basically I couldn't get a guy if I wanted to. And in my teenage mind, I was like, it's really not true. And so I intentionally sought out the star player of a football team, and the result of that action was I got pregnant. And I didn't even tell him. I knew, right? I knew it. And I had tried to choose abortion. That didn't work for me. And so I just went off to camp, and I asked the nurse there if they were, I was like, you're bound by HIPAA, right? You can't tell any of my stuff. And they said yes, and I said, okay, so I'm pregnant, and I'm just gonna, I was reading my mom's nursing books and was just sort of following my pregnancy along and checking in with the book and with the nurse, and came and it got a little obvious, so I had to tell my parents, and came up here, and my mother's words were, and I thought you were a bulldacker. And I told my mom. And in my mind, I was like, oh, well. I wouldn't count that out. But I didn't say anything. And, in a way, it gave me a weird kind of, it wasn't that people were happy about it by any stroke of the imagination. But people were, probably in their mind was, I thought she was a dyke. And so it gave me a certain amount of room to navigate. But I knew I couldn't stay in Zanesville, Ohio. Like, I knew I had to get out of there. I wanted to go to college. I knew enough from watching That Girl and some other things that the modern woman could, mothers went to school, people that were married and had kids went to school, went to college and managed it. So I just was like, I can manage it. And we went before the dean of this person and that person, and everybody was like, talk to your roommates. If they're not okay with it, we'll put you in a single. They were all okay with it, and so I lived in the Towers. I came in my freshman year to OSU to the Towers, and that's where I was. And then I had my son, and I decided my parents. I turned 18, but my parents still controlled my mind. At least I felt like they did. And so it was their thought that if I kept my son, that I was going to have to come home. And I knew that I would either end up in the river, he and I would end up in the river, or he would be visiting me in a padded room somewhere, that I could not. And I was too ignorant about social services and too worried about, too prideful and too worried about embarrassing my family even more, that I decided to give him up for adoption. And so I gave him up for adoption and finished my year with, and finished up my freshman year. And then that summer, I went to camp again, and when I came back from there, I started living with some lesbians that I had met. But I'd always been, was that when I came back? Somewhere in there, so I was here. Wait, that summer I skipped. That summer I didn't work at camp. I might have been working at the High Lie or something, which was this huge family-owned restaurant industry down on Olentangy and King. And they had their own bakery in there. They processed their own meat. They did everything there, and I worked there. But I got, I want to say, maybe I did go there. I'm not really sure. It gets fuzzy in there. I was just sort of, it became my job to graduate because I didn't want, having given my son up for adoption, I didn't want that to have been done in vain. But it takes me 15 years. Is that right? I got my undergrad, I think, 92, 79 is, yeah, right? 14. To get my, 14, yeah, to get my undergrad. It was, because I didn't have the money. My family we didn't really understand how all of it worked. I got some grants, but too afraid to take loans. And I did, at that time it was Columbus Technical Institute, so I would do classes, what Columbus State is now. I would do classes there. I met someone with 4 kids and kind of went that road, and only would take a class here or there and put myself in a provider role, and just it was kind of nutty. But as I played football, there was the Columbus Pacesetters, and so they were a semi-pro, all-women football team. And I mean, talk about a study in gender. It was all some beefy women, some just like straight out diesel, what we would call diesel dykes. And they were very much like, it was football culture. It was, I mean, sometimes I think of it as kind of a coming out of my masculine side, because everything about like drinking beer and catcalling and, just like being every tomboy's dream to just like really like you played sports, and you just like were cool, and we had jackets, like it was just like it was a football team, and just had so much fun, and all the girls were just always buzzing around, and but there would always be this part of me too that I used to say that I was a lesbian then, but I was a lesbian politically. And so I was always going to school, and they were pretty middle or working class. The majority of the women were working class or trades. There were a lot of at that time the government had all of these sort of Title 20 programs that were going on trying to give women equity in non-traditional jobs. So that was great for lesbians and gender-nonconforming women, right? Because they got to go out and learn all of these trades and become journeymen. And so I kind of got raised by them. I allowed them to call me a baby butch, but that was not an identity that I was interested in. I was not interested in, that usually comes with sort of what's called a butch femme dynamic in same-sex female relationships. That never quite fit for me. I would try to go along with it, but I was also a college kid. And so I was also sort of, and just to give you an idea, so my degrees in women's studies, both my undergrad and my graduate degrees, but my graduate degree was an individualized program with mass popular culture and critical race theory. So I like to look at everything that's popular and ask why, and ask, who's selling. It used to always be the sort of Aunt Jemima-ish, modernized black woman that was really telling you these cleaning products work, and then it went to somebody that looked kind of Latina or something, and now like it's across the gamut. So just in looking at stuff like that. So of course I'm going to do that while I'm in these groups. And so, they would tease me about being the professor and all that. And I would say things to them like, well, I'm a lesbian politically, which means I can get down with what lesbians are talking about, what they care about. That works for me. I am a feminist, somewhere probably in between a womanist and a feminist. I like a lot of the ideals, but the man-hating, that doesn't work for me. And I think it's a little more complicated than masculinity is just wrong, and talking about that before Judith Haberstam even comes along with their female masculinities. These are questions that I'm kind of doing, and they're sort of like, Professor, what are you talking about now? So I saw myself a part of it, but not necessarily a part of it. And looking at the different ways that we were just starting to talk about identity politics. So that would probably be like 89, 90 or something. And so we're just now starting to talk about all of this. And this type of lesbian, the diesel dyke, is on her way out because the rise of the lipstick lesbians comes in with Reagan, comes in with everybody like wanting to have their white picket and be just like the hetero people with your 1.7 kid and you're living in the burbs and your 2 cars. And so with that, you know, it was a class thing too, right? Because most of these people are working class. So with that shift, how it's okay for you to be gendered in these communities, the celebration of this hyper-masculinity and lesbianism starts to backslide. And you get lipstick lesbians saying, well, I hate football and it's horrible and your behavior is horrible and you are going to deal with this, and really we should have been having conversations about gender. But it came out talking about patriarchy as the thing, not really gender as this thing, except for gender equity in pay. At least that's my purview as a person right into it. And the whole time, kind of like they're going, yeah, but for me. And then we fast forward to when does Matthew Shepard happen? 89, 90?
Early 90s, I think.
89, 90?
90.
90s, right?
Yeah.
So we get to Matthew Shepard, and by my, my sophomore year, started my junior year, my advisor is like, I just can't get happy. Like, I'm in education, but, I mean, think about it. And I thought I could just wear the hat until I got that little degree, and then my classroom would be different. But that's a soul killer right there. And so my advisor says, listen, they're getting ready to do this, give a undergraduate degree in women's studies. I think you should check it out. And so I end up over in women's studies and get to have more of these conversations, and really we start to see, Camille Paglia comes in there saying, oh, you feminists are crazy, and I see it this way. And so it just I just keep gravitating towards the conversations that are about gender. Matthew Shepard happens, and right before that, a black man is killed in Texas, I believe, and drugged behind a car. And white people are horrified. It disappears in the news. And there were things about him, and no disrespect to his memory or his family, there are things about him, as I have watched the documentary and heard the story then, that seemed familiar. And what I would say now is he at least seemed a little bit funny and a little bit gender nonconforming. But nothing in the way that the response was to Matthew Shepard. And there's something about when all of that happened that I went to my Boston. I was the coordinator of gay, lesbian, bisexual students. And I asked why there was no tea. And she told me that there was no tea because you had to petition the name to the Board of Trustees, and that the sentiment was until somebody came specifically asking, which was unlikely, right? I mean, at this time, they were regularly charging people with importuning and for being in the bathroom. Like, you could go to jail for being a cross-dresser. Why would anybody come forward? But until that happened, they weren't going to do it. So the next day, I came into work very seriously and told my boss that I was claiming a transgender identity. So I always did that as a political move. I knew I was somewhere in the middle, and it probably, and I very much like to just say things in the way I'll use they pronouns now, just to kind of get somebody thinking, to get somebody maybe to ask, to try and facilitate a conversation. I was like, well, I'm going to claim a transgender identity, and I need support. What else do we have to do? And we added the T. And so it's kind of funny how I come into this conversation or this place around transgenderedness. You know, it's always been any of the things because there wasn't a quite fit, but it fit better than where I was before. And now here we are. You know, I've had transgender folks be dismayed because they feel that people have fought so long for transgender to be recognized, that folks like myself ruin it by refusing to claim a male or female. And it's just like, why do we keep doing this? And it's my journey reluctantly, you know? I think now the national, the Transvisibility National March on DC is at the end of this month, September 28th. And I was just thinking to myself that I have made these marches to DC for so many times, for my freedom, and in some respects for other part of the community I want to be included in, knowing that I'm not really included in it, that I'm included because numbers are great, but the minute that the cameras are away, you're going to be acting snide, you're going to have male and female in your single-stalled bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so here we march again for what I would have thought would have been my crowning glory of finally getting there to march for myself. And I still find myself remiss that I have had trans people say, when I'm like, well, hey, I use all three pronouns. I will say I use he, they, she. People who have known me forever and that I know see me and know me can use she. I'm not bothered by that because at the end of the day, I just feel like a pronoun shouldn't be what sends me over the edge. I don't deny anyone else that, but there's so much coming at us. Your wrong use of the pronoun, I really have to say to myself, well, what is wrong with that? But like, what's for me, what's wrong with that? For me, it's not. Unless I've not met you before. Unless I know, like in a medical situation, you're saying that because you see me as she. You don't care about anything but my biology, and you're disrespecting me. You know, that's where I might get upset about she, but this person was like, you're just messing all up. All my life I wanted to be called she, and I want to go into the female women's department. Okay? I'm happy that you can do that, and that's fantastic. Why are you begrudging me? I didn't say you have to change the whole department to be this or the other. It would be better if clothes were just clothes and you could just go get the clothes. It would be better. But, and let people decide for themselves whether it's a male or female thing or whatever it is. But why would you? And she was just like, because you're messing it up. She just kept saying that over and over again, that you're messing it up. So it's like the fight never, I don't know, who knows if we're going to look up and see maybe just a national march for our lives. I've kind of been liking I think it's called Moral Monday. They do like go around doing these silent marches, and they include all these platforms, but they include them because it's the right thing to do. Not because, we want racial equity because it's the right thing to do. And then they take it and they show it's the right thing to do by the rules that we've set forward to govern us. And they pull out, here's where it says it in the Constitution, and here's what matches with it with the Bible. Here this is. It's the right thing to do. That's what we should do. And so I've really been kind of leaning on that. I would prefer not to have to come up waving my, trans, gender-nonconforming. I would appreciate that. I would appreciate if people would just come to me, let's talk about Garth Brooks. I love Garth Brooks. Let's talk about that. I love Kane Brown. Let's talk about that. I love Tina Marie too. I love caving. Let's talk about that. That's unusual. I don't meet very many people who do that. I don't know. I'm dying to ride one of those death trap scooters, but I can't get anybody to ride one with me. Let's do that. Why's it got to be about my trans self, my trans masculine self doing that? It's just such a waste of time. It's like the weird thing of, and I've gone, sorry for anybody who I've gone to your thing and you're seeing it now and feeling some kind of way. But I go to these gender reveal parties and I don't understand what's going on. You can't reveal the gender. You cannot reveal the gender. What are you doing? And revealing the sex isn't telling you, biological sex isn't telling you anything either. Maybe wait and have the party after the baby and whatever you decide to do there. Maybe wait and have that when they're like 4 or 5. When they can verbalize by that time. Kids by the time of 3 can get you to understand how it is that they feel about themselves. Maybe we do that. Why the rush? There's so much other stuff you need for a baby. Can you just why? And you're sitting there and I'm just like, this is no different. Gender and sex are 2 different things, people. They're not the same thing. What are you doing? Are you celebrating are you celebrating the presence of a vagina or not? Is that what we're celebrating? I really don't know right now. What is that telling you? But I don't know if this baby's going to want to wear all 40 of those bows or not. My daughter hates bows. Would never wear a bow when her other parent, when her Mimi would put them on her. So does that mean anything? And now she hates pants. She wears skirts all the time. So I don't get it, but I have a niece, now my nephew, who was always my nephew. But people just refuse. And I remember folks going, but look at this cute outfit. And he's like, no, screaming, no, he doesn't want to put it on. It's just, I don't know.
You got them to put the T in
The LGB.
LGBT. What was was there any trans community before that? Was there much of one, or?
There was, and it was, let's see, what were they called? Because at that time we had Trans Menace Society, which I believe is like a magazine. I want to say that there was definitely a club on Cleveland Avenue called the Twilight. And a lot of what I will say now, the trans women hung out there. There were drag queens who did shows in that. But what I know now that I didn't know that I was seeing is that the trans girls hung out there too. And so I would imagine a lot of them were working girls, and sex workers, and then the queens. The people that I lived with were friends with a lot of the queens and the trans girls. So the universe is funny. So they would come over almost every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, sometimes Sunday after the bars and have breakfast at our house. So I would be surrounded by these trans women. And so, yeah, but it was, I suppose that it might have been out of the purview of it was night, it was kind of like nobody came out until night time. And so it was always in the context of that, but we would have any holiday, we would be getting together. There was also the South Bend, who's been there for forever, and that's always been a refuge for trans women. There were some trans men, and there were a couple that hung out at Summit Station, which was the longest running owned and operated dyke bar on the eastern seaboard, from sometime in the mid to late 60s until about 2000, I think. Maybe 98. And so there were a couple trans men who came in there, but they were sort of stealth. Like, people knew, and they were protected, fiercely protected. But there were a couple other people I knew, but they left to go live their lives as men, as heterosexual men. And so you would say, yeah, but we did a lot more house parties then, and a lot more people getting together. There weren't that many bars to go out in. And trans folk, a lot of times, it's not the easiest to go and do because everybody thinks that you're a drag performer. And so that's offensive. And there wasn't, again, we weren't where we are as a country or a society where there was a lot of standing up for people. You're basically just told to get over it or to stop being a freak, or that our freakiness is why the rest of them have such a hard time out in the world. And so most of this stuff was sort of inside the hub of the trans community itself. And they would call themselves trannies or transsexuals. They didn't really, transgender was seen more as a clinical word or something, or sociology word maybe, but not so much. People weren't like, yeah, I'm a trans. And if they did, it's that kind of thing, I'm a transgender. It was a thing you were, not a state of being, which that is changing, and it's the conversation that we have with folks.
So the trans community certainly wasn't as defined as like the lesbian or gay community at that time.
I would say no, and I would still say kind of no. I mean, we have Trans Ohio now, but, they represent a very small cachet of people, and you had different sort of families almost of folks. But they did have the Crystal Club. There was the Crystal Club, which was a T-girl. It was a T-girl get-together, but I didn't know that much about it. I just know that we would advertise for them. But there was no, groups of people getting together, even, on campus, even after we added the T, because people are really, we're still calling people cross-dressers, and there's just all these bad connotations. So trying to get somebody out and into a space where they're not going to be seen was difficult. So they kind of had their own phone networks, and I am an inside outsider. I'm the queer's queer. So, and trans girls, particularly then, were having a really difficult time with trans masculinity and seeing that as something different than a dyke or a lesbian. So that to them, you're just being a lesbian. No, I'm not. Oh, girl, yes, you are. I mean, look how butch you are.
So you mentioned that people, reacting like they were a trans person was in drag when really they were just being honest about who they are. But so how do you look at because you were part of the H.I.S. Kings for a while, how do you look at, how does that fit into all of that?
His Kings, it's kind of interesting. I think then it were character, I would say personality traits that I just let out. So my characters, I started out with his Kings as only doing Lustivious, Dela Virgion, who's a drag queen, because I really always had a little penchant for drag queens. Almost every major, and I always thought that it was interesting, almost every major comedian always does some drag queen-esque character, and Flip Wilson was one of my favorite comedians, and he always did Geraldine. And so growing up, I would do Geraldine. And Red Skelton had, I can't remember what his character was, but I would do that. And then whenever I would see the shows, I'm just like, I want to do that. Because it wasn't that I didn't want to wear feminine clothes. I didn't wear feminine clothes because I didn't want to be treated the way that you're treated in feminine clothes. It was, I adore high heel. I adore all the trappings, the costume of it. But I didn't want to do it because it was expected of me. And I didn't want to do it because then I would get treated in a way that was not empowering. So this idea of putting this on, and I guess it would also be sort of going with, we patterned the show after the drag queen shows, and there was a drag queen who moderated it. And so I just was like, I know, I'll be a drag queen and I'll host the show. And you all can do the king part. We had watched this film called The Shinjuku Boys. And the Shinjuku boys are cross-dressers, female to male cross-dressers who serenade folks who come to dinner at their club. And they're like, wait on them and serve them. It's a really fascinating part of the Japanese culture. And so that kind of got our head spinning. And we were tired of gay men owning kitsch. And we were tired, frankly, of lesbians and the lesbian with guitar, a muumuu, and comfortable shoes. We were like, that's not us. Julie liked electronica and club music, and we were tired of getting sweated and bumped out on the floors of the guy bars. And so we were like, well, what would it look like if we did it? And so I decided, it just sort of came naturally. I'd always done something with, where they called the Sweeney Sisters on Saturday Night Live. A friend and I used to do that, and we would like get these sheets or curtains out and dress all up. So it just was part of what I was already doing. And so I thought this will give me a chance I already knew that Lustivious would wear nothing less than a 6-inch heel. It's come down over the years, but nothing less than a 6-inch heel, and be done up, be dripping in jewelry and eyelashes. And it was a very, very natural outlet for the femininity that was in me, because I was always being so kind of squelching that down because I did not want to be seen as a girl. And I didn't, now I may look all like this and still have eyelashes on, you know? But it like gave me an opportunity to play with that stuff. And so I didn't think about it in terms of who I was. I suppose there was a part of me that knew that this was probably an exploration of my gender, but I didn't think of it that way. I just wanted to present, I adore Victor Victoria. And so that character in there, Julie Andrews' character in there, I just got to thinking about all that. And very early on, I said, I'm going to be a drag king. And my drag king is a drag queen. So Lustivious does not happen in my mind without Luster. She cannot happen without him. She was his drag queen. Well, ultimately, now that I use that name, Luster, was the realist of me, was this character kind of in between. So for the first year of his Kings, I would be Lustivious, and every once in a while, because we always did a production number, we always did an opening production number and either a mid or a closing production number. And so as they got more intricate, sometimes it would be necessary for me to introduce it while everybody's getting in their costume. We'd run into the problem, how are we gonna do this? Because I needed to get into a costume change or something. And what we came up with, I was like, I know. I'm gonna be her brother. Luster is gonna come out on stage. And Lustivious would always talk about she had a finishing school for wayward drag queens in Switzerland, and that, she would always be talking about the different tips and stuff. And so her plane got delayed, and that's how it started. Her plane got delayed, and her brother is stepping in for her. And so we did that for about 6 months. Always, sometime through the show, I would be Luster and then do this thing. Or I would leave as Lustivious and come back as Lester. And I'd gotten a call, Lustivious had gotten a call or something. And I started having problems going between the two characters. And it really started messing with my mind. And I'm an extroverted introvert. And so, like, before a show, I can't eat after noon. I don't talk to people if I can help it. Even if I'm producing the show, I try to have someone who's helping me who will, because I feel like I'm gonna pass out every time before I get on the stage. I have anxiety like that. And so we started doing that. I'm having all these problems and I'm also like, who am I? Like, who am I? Because Lester feels like I start leaving my facial. I work really hard to have very realistic facial hair, and I just start like leaving it on all the time. Like if it got so good that I could keep it for a couple days, and people could not tell even in the daylight. And so then I'm just like, what is happening here? And one night, I was like, stop the music. And they stopped. She was our DJ. And she's like looking at me like, what's going on? And I was like, you guys are such great fans. Audience, la da 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 da. I've been lying to you. I need to tell you the truth. And before it's all done and over, I come out as Lester. I was like, I come out as a drag queen. I say, you've probably noticed that my sister and I aren't on stage ever together. It probably has seemed strange. You're so good to me, and there's something that you really need to know. Lester, I thought that you would, start calling me names, and you would think that I was gay, and just all of this stuff. And I say, but you need to know I'm a drag queen. And everything, like, it's just like things slid into place. And I didn't really have to hide. I was able then to have facial hair and have jewels and eyelashes on, and I'm just fine. Lustivious never tucked. Lustivious doesn't tuck. Lustivious wears a codpiece. There's always some kind of adornment in her crotch area, even if it's under a skirt or a fabulous pair of shorts or something. It is very obvious that she doesn't tuck. And all of that just kind of came into play and into who I am today. And I started I changed the spelling of my name. And what I started using in the 90s to my born name is Sheila, Sheila. But I changed my spelling of my name to Sile in the mid 90s. I was into numerology then, and the vibration on Sheila and the rest of my name was not well, and actually spoke to what was going on with me at the time. And went bowling with a friend who just got back from the UK, and they spelled my name Sile. And the minute that they did it, I like really liked it. And there's a schwa on the I, or not schwa, accent, on the I, schwa, I think. So they spelled it that way. And I did the vibration that night on it, and it was where I wanted to be headed. And I never turned back, and I just started spelling my name. And that was before 9/11, when you could do stuff like that. I've even flown on it before 9/11. Not so easy now, but I used that for the longest time. And then with Mosaic and the people I knew there, they knew me from performing, and they knew me from emceeing, and they knew me as Luster, and they started calling me Luster. And I answered to that name. People in the entertainment world, that's what they call me. And I realized, like, that is my name. Like, that works for me. And so hopefully within the year, we'll officially, I've never felt the need to go and officially change it. But I'm going to do that. Ruben Herrera, when he passed away, Ruben and I, he was the first person of color who was queer and faith, claimed a Christian identity, and had kids, and all of this stuff that I ever met. And that was, he and I were trying to figure it out. I think it was probably like around 82 or 3, something like that. And there's something that happened when I heard that he had passed. And in those moments that follow, when you hear something like that, one of my thoughts was, I'm going to change my name. I'm going to change the spelling of my name. And I'm going to start HRT. And that's what I'm going to do. In all of the thousands of thoughts I had, that was a defining moment for me. And I'm not really sure. I've never thought about doing testosterone because I have a phobia of needles. And just the thought of having to take a shot, I didn't know what I was going to do. I've been praying for them to come up with something because diabetes runs in my family. And I was already thinking, what if I become diabetic? What am I going to do? It's really tough. It's a really tough thing for me. And it just like went out of my mind. What I heard was, you will deal. I also think it was because I also very much about, that is not, I want tea because I'm not going to have a mustache and beard. I'm not going to have lamb chops and a mustache without it. And I want lamb chops and a mustache. Do I want a hairy butt crack? No, I don't. But that's why they got razors in the Nair. But I have a naturally deep voice, but I wanted my voice to be deeper. That is one of the things that I was not allowed to have when I was young, was a deep voice. And I learned to talk on top of my voice, like this, to not offend anyone and to make myself seem less intimidating. But I really like to talk here, And so I wanted that, and just the squareness of it, and finally, and I think that I wasn't, because I honestly think that I was waiting for my parents to pass, so it would just be easier for everybody. And I didn't want to have to field the questions about, well, why now? Why now? You've been taking a transgender, now you want to be a dude, no, I don't. But I do. Technology has advanced, medicine has advanced to provide me with something that I feel has really been missing. And I'm going to do that. And I think that I can speak to people now, having lived in my truth without testosterone. I can be a better advocate in saying, you take your time, because an injection isn't what it's about. It isn't Just in the same way that collagen may make you have puffy lips, but if you don't think you're beautiful ahead of that, you're not going to think you're beautiful after it. And you're probably going to have more problems, you know? So you just want to think through it, and it doesn't fix everything at all. It just changes how the issues are going to happen. And
Well, thank you for talking about so much with us. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that you haven't spoke about yet?
you know, I just would hope what people will hear is not to be afraid of the universe in front of you. You know, and by that I mean there's just so many things that you don't know about, that you haven't imagined, that you haven't seen, and to embrace it rather than try to capture it, and to allow it to teach you things. You know, the accepting me is really an acceptance of yourself. Accepting me allows a person to accept other things about themselves. That's what we do when we accept people that are really different from us. It opens up so much inside of ourselves, and to not be afraid of that. We are created as diverse creatures for a reason. Really for a reason. Our curiosity couldn't withstand if we were just the same. And I just want parents to love their children and to love themselves enough to love their children without bounds. And to not accept when people tell you, like, I have to look at myself when someone hits a nerve. What I know is that's something I believe about myself. And so to work to get that thought out of what do I need to do to change that about myself? And if I do think that about myself, say, you know, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I do have some issues, and that is what I'm doing, but I'm doing the best that I can. And I'm trying to be the most positive that I can. Am I always going to get it right? No. Is it always going to be the best idea? No, and that really is okay, because there's too much to try and get it all absolutely right. You know? But to just I mean, it's cornball, but it's to let love. Let it. Really let it. Let love guide you. If you're worrying about, if your neighbor has a problem with you because your little boy loves that jumper, then your neighbor needs to go on down the road. And really, if you stand up, people don't know how to, like, if they come to me and they're like, oh, you're trans, you're, you know, this, that, I'm like, you didn't know that? Wow. Really? How'd you not know that? Is that bothersome? Well, yeah, well, why? Well, is there any way you can not look at me? Can you do that? And I think, you know, just remember, like, prepare for the conversation. I didn't wake up being able to say this, but I finally looked myself in the mirror and say those mean stuff to myself so that I can practice a retort, a response, or practice. I have another friend who doesn't engage at all. And what she says is, they're not talking to me. They might be talking to somebody else. I don't go by tranny. They're not talking to me. I don't go by effing faggot. So I know they're not talking to me at all. She's like, people that you'll watch them spin in a circle and their heads explode because you're just like, you're not talking to me. Does it hurt? Hell yeah, it hurts. And for us, our turnaround is to go and do something that's going to lift somebody else up. I got you. I got beat down by 4 white frat guys while their 2 white co-ed stood there and laughed. And every time anything I do, they might have left me there, but every time I do something, it's a thanks to them because I put it in there. I put all of that energy into that to make the light brighter. To make the light brighter, it just need a pinprick to get through the darkness. And it's just like, look for the pinpricks because they really are there. Do not let anybody convince you that they're not. They're there. All throughout history, you could see their pinpricks are there. You just got to look up and look for them. And if you think you don't have it, it's because you think you don't have it. That's what I would say.